All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to Philosophy of the Environment. So, we've been taking a look at our duties towards the living environment, meaning non human animals, and what our ethical responsibilities towards them are. So, our first author that we took a look at was Peter Singer, and Singer argued that the key factor is suffering. Animals have the same capacity to suffer that humans do, they feel pain and fear and suffering in the same ways and therefore they get equal moral consideration, but that doesn't always equate to equal treatment or to the same treatment because their interests are just fundamentally different. So Gary Francione took this argument a little bit farther and said that not only do we need to extend the same moral consideration, but the same moral treatment, meaning that you shouldn't do anything to an animal that you wouldn't do to a human being. So, for instance, if you wouldn't perform medical experiments on a human being, you shouldn't perform them on an animal either. And that's what the same capacity to suffer means for people who hold this view. Now, I want to point out that most people disagree with Singer, at least in their actions, and you can easily see this by looking at the amount of meat that most Americans eat and the fact that they're totally indifferent to where that meat comes from or under what conditions it was raised and harvested. But if you really press them on why they have that attitude, on why they think that arguments like the one Singer presents are wrong, it's hard for them to really come up with anything, so they just kind of deal with this by not thinking too hard about the issue. So surprisingly, shockingly, this extends to the philosophical community as well. John Searle, for example, he was a famous philosopher at UC Berkeley. He's best known now for the fact that he sexually harassed his students pretty badly. But he summed up this position pretty well when he said, in all seriousness, yeah, I think we all know that we need to think deeply about our treatment of animals, but let's do that later because first I want to eat some more hamburgers. Now, in the paper that you read, Bonnie Steinbock, she's actually building up an argument against Singer, right? She thinks that there's differences between humans and animals that are important to how we should think about them in ethical terms. So her argument is spelled out in more detail in her paper, but the important point is that being rational and intelligent, they are morally relevant differences. Humans are moral agents in ways that animals cannot be. This means, humans are responsible for their own actions, they can treat others fairly and return the moral consideration that you extend them, and they have a sense of dignity that's affronted if they're made a tool for others. And they have these properties because they're intelligent and rational. For these reasons, humans are entitled to different and more moral consideration than animals are, similarly in duty of the species that they belong to. Of course, anyone who's going to make this argument, they have to explain the fact that humans who are not intelligent, are not rational, or who can't be responsible for their own actions get the same moral consideration. They still get special moral consideration. Or, either that or they have to just bite the bullet and say, like, look, humans who are not rational or not intelligent for whatever reason don't get preferential treatment, and whatever you can do to like an animal as far as medical experimentation or as far as harvesting them for meat, you can do the same thing to these unfortunate people. So at this point the paper gets rather confusing and Steinbock seems to be having some trouble. Essentially she says it all boils down to a special sense of sympathy that we feel for our own species. Now you can think about whether you find that to be a satisfying answer or whether our argument's kind of breaking down a little bit at this point. But considering those unfortunate humans who aren't rational for one reason or another, it's always a difficult point for anyone who's trying to refute Singer. So there are a few philosophers out there, mostly in the past now, who argue that animals have no moral value at all, so you're essentially justified in doing whatever you want to them. So it's important to note that Steinbock is definitely not one of these. Her main concern is animal experimentation. She says it's important to take the suffering of animals into account, and we should certainly never inflict it needlessly. But it doesn't count compared to the suffering of humans, again because humans are rational and therefore moral agents in ways that animals are not. So if experiments are necessary to save human lives and suffering, then you're justified in performing them. And again, I know that medical research is a topic that's probably on everyone's mind a lot right now, so this is something to think about. At the same time, Animals do have definite moral value, Steinbock says, even if it's less than that of a human. So Steinbock ends the paper by noting that recognizing this fact should cause us to drastically rethink our treatment of animals in our society. Now, she doesn't really expand on what these mean, but I leave it up to you to think about whether on Steinbock's position, things like the consumption of meat, and especially factory farmed meat, are what kind of is justified and what kind of animal testing is justified. So think about these issues, and we'll discuss them on Friday, like with the discussion board, and I will see you on Wednesday.